Good. What a week. I'm worn out. I was just joking to my Substack readers that I'm pretty much been at my desk since Sunday morning with a couple of bathroom breaks. This administration is killing me. I mean, it's like
You
between
and me
this
as
and
well.
Congress, because I mean, Congress, especially Mike Johnson, I mean, he gives these people like they work like 3 days a month. He
Right.
gives them like weeks off where nothing happens, and then they come back together like they did this week, and it's like they go all night. I mean, they started at 1 o'clock in the morning last night with the Rules Committee. I think they're still going.
Yeah, I believe they are. And do you think this bill is actually going to get passed, this beautiful bill?
I mean, you got these two factions going at it over multiple issues, the Freedom Caucus, and then I would call them the Salt Caucus, which is the Republicans from blue states, that represent districts and that are swing districts and Democratic states. They're going at it over multiple issues: Medicaid cuts, the SALT issue, which is basically like Nevada. You're in Nevada, right?
Yes.
You don't pay state income taxes because you have all the taxes from gambling, right? Same thing with like Florida. They don't pay state income taxes because they get all the tourism tax.
Right.
So, but northern states, industrial states and stuff, they have state income taxes. And so, that's the issue, is those states are able to deduct their state income taxes from their federal income taxes because it's not income, it's money you're sending to the state. So that's a big bone of contention between the two groups that they're fighting with each other. So ultimately, like, I think at this point, Trump doesn't care. He just wants to declare victory. And so he's twisting arms really hard. But, he promised during the campaign, what was odd was when he went to New York and campaigned in Long Island and had a rally, he promised to repeal the SALT tax cap, which is exactly what these SALT people want. And now he's saying he doesn't want to do it. He's reneged on that campaign promise, although nobody's really talked about that.
Ron, what do you make of the fact that, he's saying how this will save us money, right? Conserving money. And yet, correct me if I'm wrong, over the course of the next 1 to 2 years, this would put us $5 or $6 trillion more in debt.
Yeah, there's no honest person that will agree with that, including Republicans. I mean, there's a small handful of Republicans in Congress that are honest about this. And most of them are the most conservative right-wingers in Congress. Thomas Massey, Chip Roy, Andy Harris, the Freedom Caucus chair. They're all saying that what they are most upset about with the current bill is the fact that it explodes the deficit, that it adds $5 trillion in new debt over the next 2 years, up to $10 trillion over the next 10 years. So they are freely admitting that it adds debt. Now, Trump, who's a habitual liar, and Mike Johnson will not admit that, but the Congressional Budget Office says it, which is nonpartisan. Economists say it. Wall Street says it. The bond market is saying it. Because that's the reason. If you want to know why mortgage interest rates just went over 7%, this is the reason. Because the bond market is looking at this bill and saying, not only is this going to continue to increase our debt, which is already huge, it is going to dramatically increase it with all this new spending. I mean, Trump just unveiled a new thing yesterday, the Golden Dome Missile Defense Shield.
Right.
Which he ridiculously claimed, this is only going to cost like $145 billion. Every expert who has studied this says minimum $500 billion, minimum. So we just added that. He's got $150 billion new and increased defense spending. He's got another $65 billion more money for deportations and DHS, more Border Patrol agents.
Yeah.
So look, Trump has never had a problem with debt in his whole life, whether in business or in government. He exploded the deficit last time he was president. He's going to do it even worse this time.
I tend to agree with you. If you're just joining us, Ron Filipkowski from Meidas Touch. Ron, what do you make of this morning meeting with the South African president, where the South African president asked him, makes kind of a joke about, I can't give you a jet. And then you have a member of the media who's a very good distinguished journalist who asked him about this jet, and Donald Trump had a hissy fit. He just lost it. What do you make of this?
Yeah, that was Peter Alexander from NBC.
Right.
So, yeah, here's the thing. When they continue to hold these meetings with foreign leaders in public, and invite the press in, as they're also doing with cabinet meetings, which no president has ever done this before,
Right.
but for Trump, everything is like a reality show. It's a reality show government. So the cabinet meetings are not really cabinet meetings where they're sitting
Right.
around talking about things. They're praise sessions. Same thing with these. So yeah, the South African leaders here got the full Zelensky treatment today, where they got berated by Trump for a variety of different issues. And Trump got mad because the reason why Alexander asked the question is because the news broke just today that the Air Force has officially accepted the jet. And so he wanted to follow up on that. But, this is one issue that Trump does not want to talk about. And the reason is because it polls horrendously. The polling on this jet issue, it's his number one worst issue right now among polls. Even his own supporters don't like it. Even Laura Loomer trashed him over the jet. So, he doesn't want to talk about the jet. He wants the jet very badly, but he doesn't want to talk about it. So when this gets brought up in front of the international press, as Trump gets extremely upset because he can't defend it.
Ron, do you agree with me that it seems like every single time in the media where Donald Trump is challenged, he'll attempt to attack the credibility of the network or the journalist? What a stupid question. And, if somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend asks a question, usually the first person to ask a question, like what happened again today, every single time somebody challenges Trump, which what I believe to be is a good question, a credible question from a credible journalist, he always goes on the offensive trying to attack.
Yeah, so he attacks people who can't fight back. That's what bullies do. And so he knows that people who work for these big media outlets can't fight back. When he can insult them, he can call them names, he can berate them. And if they return fire, if Alexander had came back at Trump and said, well, I think you're a terrible president. You say I'm a terrible journalist. I think you're a terrible. Alexander gets fired. He's fired. So Trump knows this. He knows that they can't respond. It's the same thing with Zelensky. The reason why they berated Zelensky is because they know that Zelensky desperately needs the United States, has to have assistance. So they know that they can sit there and berate him and belittle him all they want, and he can't really respond in kind. So that's what Trump does. He bullies the powerless. But when he ever gets confronted by someone who's a peer of his, he doesn't do that. He's very polite. He's very respectful. He's somewhat deferential. But yeah, when he is faced with somebody he doesn't like who can't fight back, that's when he goes into attack mode.
I'm wondering, Ron, what do you make of the question that was asked about, listen, you're not allowing refugees, for lack of a better term, that are brown, right? I mean, I know that's not what the journalist asked, but let's be honest, that's what's going on here. But, if you have 10 refugees that happen to be 100% white, why are you not treating these other refugees the same way? And then he doesn't answer the question and he goes on the offensive again. What do you make of that moment today?
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, any objective criteria that you define for asylum, there are many other groups that meet that criteria ahead of white South Africans. So if your criteria is, well, people that have been murdered and robbed, well, you know what? We have like a couple of million people that are in the United States right now seeking asylum who were victims of those kind of crimes in the countries that they came from.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're subject to oppression. So the bottom line is this is not based on anything objective. This is not based on the fact that white South Africans are being persecuted worse than other minority groups in other countries around the world, because that is, in fact, objectively not the case. The bottom line is this: they're white. They're white. And, for all the people that Trump is talking about deporting, you don't see white people getting put on planes. We have tons of white immigrants from Europe, especially Ukraine, here in the United States right now, with asylum applications pending, citizenship applications pending. None of them are being deported. So this is a racial thing. It has nothing to do with genocide, crime. Yes, there's crime in South Africa. South Africa is a violent country with a high crime rate. It's been that way for about 70 years.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not any worse than a lot of other places where asylum seekers are coming from. The only difference is This is a white minority in a black majority country.
Yep.
That is the only difference.
Ron, I'm wondering, because I think we have the same opinion when it comes to this James Comey stuff with the 8647. I think he's probably lying, and I don't buy his story. With that being said, you have a lot of Republicans who said 8646, and yet nobody seemed to have a problem with that. I had Ed Krasenstein on the show yesterday, and as you know, I believe you do, that Ed, got a visit from the Secret Service. Absolutely absurd and ridiculous. What do you make of this 8647 controversy?
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. I mean, I'm no fan of James Comey. I think he's kind of a weasel, And look, this is a guy who he posted seashells on his Instagram page. Now, my first question when I first saw this was from the right wingers going viral was, who the hell is following James Comey on Instagram? Like, he's going to have like 9 people on following him. Who the hell is following? So the fact that, of course, their take was that Comey, who hasn't been in government for like 9 years, controls some kind of sleeper cells out there of assassins. And this was his signal to them. He was going to post 8647 seashells to the assassin sleeper cells across the United States and activate them to go after Trump. I mean, that's what they were saying. I mean, which is, of course, utterly preposterous. 86 can mean a lot of different things. I think to anyone who's in the restaurant industry where the term is most used, knows that it means you're out of something. You're out, cancel it from the menu, take it off the menu because we're out of 86 the steak. And I think that's what he was saying was, hey, we need to get rid of Trump. We're done with Trump. We're tired of Trump. Get him out of here, impeach him, vote him out. Or he's going to leave at the end of his term. But I think that clearly Comey was not calling on people to assassinate Trump. But the ridiculous part of it is the fake outrage on the right. They know full well that he was not saying that. But they want the clicks, they want the eyeballs, they want the views. And so they got to whip up another fake controversy, and then they're on to the next one the following day.
Yeah. I'm wondering, you've covered Kristi Noem to a T as far as the cosplaying and her weird behavior. And it seemed like yesterday, under oath, she couldn't even give a definition of what habeas corpus is. I'm wondering, what do you make of that?
Yeah. So look, I'm a lawyer for 30 years. Obviously, I know what that is, but I recognize that there are some, lay people on the street who may not know what that term means, even though it is the central bedrock foundational principle of the United States legal system, which is why it's one of the few things that's actually written into the Constitution, habeas corpus. And basically what it means in Latin is produce the body. Meaning that the government cannot seize any human being, citizen or otherwise, and put them in a cell or disappear them without giving them a court hearing, doing it out in the open, notifying the public that we have just arrested this person. Here is why. We have just detained this person. Here is why. Here's the list of the allegations. That's what habeas corpus is. So when you suspend habeas corpus, which it says in the Constitution you can do in times of national emergency, such as a civil war or an insurrection, where you suspend the writ of habeas corpus, meaning that you don't have to give somebody a court date if you detain them. This is an emergency situation, which we have only done a handful of times in our history. That even though the lay person might not understand all of that, that's in the Constitution, the head of the Department of Homeland Security has to know it, and has to know it particularly a week after the policy director of the White House, who is Stephen Miller, threatened to suspend it. So the fact that she would go in front of Congress and have absolutely no idea what habeas corpus is, it shows you the clown show because one after another, then there was like 6 committee hearings yesterday. So you had her not knowing what habeas corpus is. You have RFK saying he had no idea that all these funds and scientists were cut that were studying ALS and other diseases. You had the Billy Long, the auctioneer, who they've nominated for IRS commissioner, who never graduated from college, who auctioned off cars and cattle in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri, who's now going to be put in the IRS. He has no idea that the law says that the president cannot direct the IRS commissioner to audit people. So it was just one cabinet official after another who doesn't know the first thing about the agency that they're in charge of.
Mesmerizing. Question about an exchange with Jasmine Crockett yesterday. I wanted to get your, or actually, I think it might have been this morning, where Crockett's getting into it with a MAGA Republican about what due process is in the Constitution. And in the Constitution, as you know, when it comes to due process, it says person. It doesn't say documented or undocumented. Yet Republicans seem to be making the argument that, well, wait a second, if you're an undocumented immigrant, that means you don't have the right to due process. And Jasmine Crockett is literally repeating word for word what it says in the Constitution. Why is this even a debate, Ron?
It's in the Constitution twice. It's in the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. So again, one of the most due process just means like, you can't have the government deprive you of your liberty or your property without giving you an opportunity to be heard in court. And what they're saying is, what they're arguing is, for the first time in American history, contrary to all U.S. Supreme Court precedent, that doesn't apply to somebody visiting the country. So a foreign student who comes here, who's paying $30,000 to attend a school in the United States, and they're going to college, can't, for example, write an editorial for the school newspaper opposing Israel's invasion of Gaza, or else they get locked up for a month, which is exactly what happened to the student from Turkey. She wrote an op-ed. She didn't call for violence. She didn't burn down any buildings. She didn't threaten any other students. And they revoked her student visa and locked her up in order to deport her when she's in the middle of her semester paying tuition. So that's the argument, that these due process laws do not apply to foreign visitors. So if you come here and you're visiting here, or you're working here and you're not a citizen, you don't have any rights, and the government can do whatever they want to you. That's what the current Republican Party stands for.
Absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And I'm with you, Ron. What do you got working on for your Substack today that you're going to be releasing out?
Man, so I'm taking a break, man. It was
a break. What a slacker you are, Ron.
3 days straight. I mean, like, I was so tired last night, just writing about all this stuff, because, like I said, the way that the Trump administration and Mike Johnson does their schedule, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
Long periods of nothing happening, and then just all kinds of mania. So, I mean, I'm probably going to try and untangle this South African visit here. Yeah. Although, wading into the history of South Africa, particularly the racial component and apartheid and all that, is a quagmire. I've done it before. Yeah. And it's a long, twisted history. So I kind of hesitate to even go in that, because Trump claimed today that he was showing the South African president all these crosses. He claimed it was a mass grave site for white farmers. It's not. There's no graves there. It's just crosses, like you see, like crosses on the side of the road to commemorate somebody died there. That's kind of what it's a white farmer that made this memorial. So I'm thinking about trying to untangle that. But again, I can tell you, anytime you wade into any South African politics, it's a messy situation.
Ron, do you struggle mentally having to cover this? I know it's your job and you do a great job at it, but do you struggle mentally sometimes having to keep up with the Trump administration and every single day? I mean, I do. That's why I'm asking you. I do. I mean, you guys do a great job at Meidas Touch, but do you ever say to yourself, man, it is really tough mentally covering this guy every single day in his administration?
Yeah, I think it's like there's very, very, very small number of people in journalism who can do it, because I think the fact that I was a criminal lawyer for so long and dealt with so many mentally ill, crazy people and so many stressful situations day after day in courtrooms is what has really helped me prepare me to be able to do it, to have a very thick skin, a big bullshit detector. I went 3 decades and where people lied to me every day. I was a criminal lawyer.
Right. You're used to
surrounded by people who lie constantly. So that has prepared me very well to cover the Trump administration for sure. But I will say, I was joking with the guys the other day. I'm like, the biggest relief has been not having to defend Biden for me, because I used to have to divide my time between covering Trump and then having to play defense against stuff that the Biden administration was doing and trying to defend them from attacks. But now I'm kind of been liberated by not having to do the second part until this week with the Tapper book, which now, I find myself back in that world again, where I'm having to spend all this time on Biden stuff, which is utterly ridiculous, because it's a media created story that the American public simply doesn't care about, but I still got to deal with it.
You still have to deal with it. We both have to deal with it every day in this administration, at least for the next 3.5+ years. Ron, you guys do such a great job at Meidas Touch. Please keep up the great work, my friend. We will catch up with you next week. Get some rest, okay? Get some rest.
Okay. All right.
Take care, Ron. We appreciate you. Ron Filipkowski, everybody, from Meidas Touch, one of the best in the business. I really love Ron, as I say that every single time he comes on this show. They're so great at Meidas Touch, and Ron's my favorite over there. There's a lot of good people over there. I love Adam Mockler, too. The Meidas Touch brothers, they're great. So we appreciate Ron, and we certainly appreciate him for joining us.